They told you it takes years to get to know someone. That's a lie. In just 30 seconds, anyone can reveal their soul in invisible details, the way they move their hands, the awkward pause mid-sentence, the glance that darts to the door when they want to flee. Machiavelli already knew that politics, guided by reality, not ideals, is built precisely on this, deciphering others before they have time to hide their true colors. Need an example? The colleague who says everything's fine with a smile but grits his teeth without realizing it. Or the boss who promises calm but whose voice quickens whenever the subject is money. The end justifies the means because when you read these micro breaks, you'll never be fooled again. While most believe rehearsed words, you learn to see what slips through the cracks in the mask. Better to be feared than loved, said Machiavelli, and feared is he who sees truths others prefer to hide. At work, in relationships, even in trivial negotiations, everyone is trying to control the situation. The appearance of virtue is a manipulator's favorite weapon. Beautiful speeches, rehearsed smiles, inspiring phrases. But those who master these 14 tricks recognize the exact moment their body betrays a lie. The salesperson who talks too much because they're desperate to close. The friend who insists on getting closer but their feet point away. The partner who says, "I trust you," but blinks too quickly. Virtue and fortune, skill and opportunity. That's what you'll achieve. Because when someone tries to use guilt, drama, or silence to manipulate, you'll have already learned the calculated use of force, not reacting, just observing and making cool decisions based on real human nature. Constant adaptability is the rule. Sometimes you retreat, sometimes you advance, but always knowing what's really happening. Those who learn this stop being played on the board and start moving the pieces. And prepare yourself because this knowledge is dangerous. It will change the way you see your family, your friends, your colleagues. It will reveal who only takes and never gives back, who feigns loyalty but crumbles at the first real cost. You might even be frightened by how much you'll see, but once you learn, there's no going back. Are you ready to see the naked truth, as Machiavelli saw it? Then let's look at 14 tricks that will make you read anyone in 30 seconds. When someone walks into a room, even before they open their mouth, they're already revealing much more than they realize. The secret is learning to observe the baseline, that person's natural state. It's like the original tone of a song. If you don't know the melody, you'll never notice when the note is out of tune. The same goes for gestures, the rhythm of speech, posture, and even breathing. Machiavelli warned us that politics guided by reality, not ideals, requires eyes trained to see what's beneath the surface. Because only when you understand how someone functions at rest can you spot the microfractures, that laugh that's too quick, the voice that cracks at the wrong time, the shoulder that recoils when it should be relaxed. It's in these fissures that the unconscious leaks, revealing hidden intentions. And here the end justifies the means. It's not about judging, but about understanding so as not to be deceived. Imagine a boss who normally speaks slowly, quietly, and with restrained movements. Suddenly, when the subject is money, he speeds up his words, blinks excessively, and adjusts his tie. This break from the norm is like a red flag waving. Better to be feared than loved isn't just a cold Machiavelli quote. It's also a warning that those who master invisible readings master the game. You can apply this to your daily life by observing friends, colleagues, or even strangers. Go to a cafe, choose a discreet table, and simply notice, how does that person hold their phone when they're relaxed? And when they receive an unexpected message? The contrast is what matters. It's not about being paranoid, but about understanding that true human nature is always revealing itself in small details that almost no one notices. The power to identify micro breaks isn't just a psychological tool, it's a strategic weapon. Think of a negotiator who notices the moment the other person's lips tighten upon hearing a proposal. This indicates discomfort, perhaps even hidden resistance. This is where the calculated use of verbal force becomes useful, pressing or retreating in the right measure, guided by what you observe, not what you hear. Virtue and fortune go hand in hand. Virtue because you need the ability to observe and interpret. Fortune because being in the right place at the right time magnifies your advantage. Predictable people are easy to control, and if you ignore the baseline, you become the prey, not the hunter. Ultimately, avoiding being hated begins with not being deceived, and this requires constant adaptability, knowing when to trust what is said and when to listen only to what the body reveals. And it is precisely at this point that the next key emerges, the congruence between speech and gesture, where truth and lies confront each other in silence. Congruence is the true lie detector of real life. It doesn't require machines, just attentive eyes. When someone says, "I'm calm," but their hands are clenched into fists, the truth lies in the body, not the mouth. Machiavelli reminded us that politics guided by reality, not ideals, requires us to believe less in what is said and more in what is demonstrated. Words are cheap, but the body pays dearly to lie. It's like a reflection in a mirror. If speech goes one way and gestures point in the opposite direction, there's a glaring contradiction. The end justifies the means in this game, because the goal isn't to condemn the person, but to understand the hidden game they're trying to disguise. And when you realize this, you gain power over the situation. Think of a meeting where a colleague says, "I fully support this project," but their body leans back in their chair and their gaze shifts. It appears to be supportive, but their body reveals resistance. Better to be feared than loved applies here in a subtle way. Those who perceive incongruity don't let themselves be manipulated by well-rehearsed speeches. Practical examples are everywhere. Watch political interviews. The candidate promises stability, but their voice trembles and their forehead sweats. Those who can't read are enchanted by the appearance of virtue. Those who can only see the mask slipping. Virtue and fortune enter again. Virtue is your ability to notice. Fortune is being present in that moment when the incongruity manifests itself. This reading is like gold, hidden in the sand, available only to those with the patience to look. The interesting thing is that when you perceive incongruence, you gain a silent advantage. You don't need to expose it, just adjust your behavior. It's the calculated use of force. It's not about attacking, but about repositioning the conversation based on what you already know the other person isn't revealing. When someone smiles, saying everything is fine, but their eyes betray sadness, the decision based on real human nature is not to remain superficial, but to consider the depth. Constant adaptability means precisely this, changing your strategy according to reality, not the fantasy created by words. And the curious thing is that when this misalignment is noticed, natural curiosity arises, reaching the next level. How does someone react when put under pressure? It's at this point that micro-gestures cease to be a choice and become pure instinct. If you want to truly know someone, observe them not in calm moments, but when the tide is high. It's under pressure that the veneer of persona cracks and instincts escape unfiltered. A simple question, have you ever thought about leaving this company, can trigger a flood of micro-reactions, a shifting gaze, a quickening breath, a voice faltering on the wrong syllable. Machiavelli knew that decisions based on real human nature require the leader to know how to provoke situations in which the mask slips. Politics guided by reality, not ideals, is precisely this, gently pushing to see how far the other person can take it. The end justifies the means because the goal isn't discomfort itself, but revelation. It's in that moment that one discovers whether someone is as firm as stone or as fragile as glass. In sales, for example, a customer might say they're just analyzing options, but when you ask if they've made a decision, their pupils dilate, their mouth closes too quickly, and their fingers drum on the table. These are signs that their speech doesn't match their true emotion. Better to be feared than loved also applies to these tests. Those who provoke don't want to hurt, but to see if the other can handle the tension without breaking down. It's like a general testing his own loyal armies in training before battle. Those who withstand the weight of training will be ready for real combat. Virtue and fortune go hand in hand here. Virtue to ask the right question at the right time, fortune to be present when the non-verbal response escapes uncensored. A simple exercise anyone can apply is this. During a conversation, insert an unexpected but light question and notice not only what's said, but what happens in the following seconds. Was there a pause too long? Did the tone of voice rise an octave? Did the body lean back in escape? The calculated use of force lies in not overdoing the provocation, but in calibrating it enough for the reaction to emerge. This is constant adaptability, adjusting the pressure according to the context, and it's at this point that you see who remains coherent even in storms, and who only knows how to smile on sunny days. Because if small provocations are already destabilizing, imagine what happens when faced with a firm no or a well-placed limit. And this is precisely the next test, seeing whether the person respects or ignores boundaries. It's in the small limits that great abuses are revealed. Those who jump a queue without embarrassment are, in essence, demonstrating how they view politics guided by reality, not ideals. They take advantage of others' carelessness to advance. Machiavelli already said that the end justifies the means, but here we need to ask whose is the end and whose are the means. Observing whether someone respects schedules, accepts a gentle no, or understands invisible boundaries is to perceive their true nature. Better to be feared than loved translates in this context into being clear about one's own limits, because people who don't respect them only understand force, never kindness. When someone invades someone else's space without asking, they reveal more than they realize. They reveal the absence of even the appearance of virtue. And those who don't respect small limits will one day demand that large ones be broken. Consider an everyday example. You tell a friend you can't go out that day, and they insist, call again, or show up unexpectedly. It seems affectionate, but it's also a lack of respect for your word. Loyal armies are formed when there is clarity and reciprocity, not unilateral insistence. Virtue and fortune in this case lie in recognizing those who respect boundaries and those who persistently try to manipulate. Decisions based on real human nature show that when someone doesn't accept a simple limit, they will later use guilt, drama, or even triangulation to get what they want. The calculated use of force here is subtle, saying no firmly, without needing to justify it, because true power lies in maintaining your position without succumbing to the need to please. Constant adaptability also means testing others' limits to see how solid they are or how much they are merely a facade. A practical exercise is this: try saying small no's and observe the reaction. Decline an invitation without giving a reason. Say you prefer another time or that you're not available to talk. Those who respect demonstrate maturity. Those who pressure reveal disguised control. This simple gesture becomes a powerful filter for measuring character. Machiavelli would say that avoiding being hated doesn't mean giving up limits, but maintaining them clearly and firmly, as the absence of boundaries breeds contempt. And when you practice this eye, you begin to notice predictable patterns. Certain people always push a little further, always testing whether they can gain an advantage. The curious thing is that after realizing this, the next step becomes inevitable. Figuring out whether this person, in addition to overstepping limits, also knows how to give something back or just extract something. Reciprocity is the invisible currency that sustains any relationship. When someone only takes without giving back, the balance is broken, and this reveals not only character, but also the life strategy the person has chosen. Machiavelli knew that politics guided by reality, not ideals, requires measuring each person's weight. The end justifies the means, but if only one side pays the price, there is no agreement, there is exploitation. It's like that friend who always asks for a ride, but never offers help when you need it. Better to be feared than loved applies here in a practical sense. It's not about literal fear, but about commanding respect so as not to be reduced to a disposable resource. The appearance of virtue may be deceiving at first, but over time, the lack of reciprocity destroys any mask. A clear example occurs in the workplace. You help a colleague with an urgent report, but when you need it, they're always too busy. This isn't a coincidence. It's standard. Loyal armies are built not only in war, but in everyday life, when every gesture is returned proportionally. Virtue and fortune come into play again. Virtue because you need the ability to perceive these patterns. Fortune because life always presents situations that reveal who gives and who only takes. The calculated use of force in this scenario means learning to cut one-sided relationships without guilt, because a decision based on true human nature shows that those who only take are unlikely to change willingly. Constant adaptability means recognizing this pattern early and repositioning yourself before wear and tear becomes habit. An exercise you can try now: do a small favor without asking for anything in return, and observe. Does the person reciprocate in some way? Sometimes it's not an equal favor, but a simple gesture of recognition. If there's no return, beware. You may be dealing with someone who turns kindness into an opportunity for exploitation. Avoiding being hated doesn't mean accepting everything in silence, but setting clear boundaries so that imbalance doesn't become the norm. And when you start mapping reciprocity, you notice a second layer: temporal coherence. Because it's not enough for someone to reciprocate once, it requires consistency over time. After all, even the most skilled manipulator can reciprocate initially, but it's in the accumulation of stories that the truth emerges. Temporal coherence is like an invisible thread that stitches together all versions of a person over time. Anyone who says the opposite of what they said yesterday unintentionally shows that their policies are guided not by reality, but by momentary convenience. Machiavelli already warned, decisions based on real human nature require attentive memory. The end justifies the means, but when the means are serial contradictions, credibility is shattered. Think of someone who one day swears allegiance to a project and shortly after defends the opposite with the same passion. This is not an evolution of thought. It is masked opportunism. Better to be feared than loved takes on a different meaning here. Those who remember what was said command respect because they reveal that they are not fooled by improvised narratives. An example: that colleague who, in January, claimed to hate change, but in March appears as the great enthusiast of innovation. Or the politician who advocates austerity during the campaign, but in office shamelessly opens the coffers. The appearance of virtue only lasts as long as no one compares versions. Loyal, self-made armies at any time remain united because there is coherence in the speech and actions of their leaders. Virtue and fortune come into play again. Virtue is the ability to remember and connect old speeches with current ones. Fortune is the right moment when the mask of inconsistency falls. The calculated use of force, in this case, is not direct confrontation, but the art of mentally registering speeches and letting them contradict themselves. Constant adaptability means adjusting your trust not in words, but in the solidity of the timeline. You can practice this with a simple exercise. Whenever someone tells an important story, remember details, dates, names, context. Then observe whether these pieces fit together in the next version. Those who lie tend to forget details. Those who tell the truth maintain the narrative thread even as months pass. Avoiding being hated isn't about remaining silent in the face of contradiction, but sometimes just smiling and mentally noting, here's a break in coherence. Because in truth, what you observe is more valuable than any accusation. And when you notice these misalignments, you also begin to see how some people resort to more subtle devices to manipulate, blame, drama, or triangulation. This is precisely where the analysis deepens, when the incongruity stops being just words and enters the realm of emotions. Guilt is one of the oldest weapons of emotional power. When someone doesn't get what they want directly, they often resort to the other person's conscience. Machiavelli once said that politics guided by reality, not ideals, is sustained by the recognition of true human nature. Few can resist the poison of guilt. After all I've done for you, who hasn't heard that phrase packaged in a dramatic tone? The end justifies the means, and for the manipulator, if guilt is the means, it will be used without hesitation. Better to be feared than loved echoes here as a reminder. If you don't command respect, you'll be held hostage by emotional blackmail. The appearance of virtue is the perfect disguise. The blamer appears altruistic, but beneath it lies cold calculation. Triangulation, in turn, is even more subtle. Instead of dealing with you directly, the person brings in a third party to reinforce their position. So-and-so also thinks you're wrong. It's like forming a mini-army of allies, even imaginary ones, to apply pressure. Loyal armies, in this case, aren't military, but third-party narratives used as weapons. Virtue and fortune come into play again. Virtue to identify when someone is trying to isolate you emotionally. Fortune to avoid being vulnerable to the game when it happens. The calculated use of force in this case is firm silence or refusal to play along. Constant adaptability means not reacting with justifications, but deferring responsibility. If that's what you think, fine. The manipulator thrives on your reaction. Denying it is breaking the spell. A practical exercise. The next time someone uses guilt against you, notice the immediate feeling of discomfort. Breathe and ask yourself, if I remove the emotion, does this argument still make sense? If the answer is no, you're faced with a ploy, not the truth. Avoiding being hated, in this case, doesn't mean giving in, but setting firm boundaries. By noticing these patterns, you begin to see how certain people alternate guilt, drama, and triangulation as if they were cards in a deck of cards always ready. And when this pattern becomes predictable, it opens up space to see something even deeper, the root of need. Because all this drama, at its core, stems from one place: internal scarcity, insecurity, the fear of being worthless. And that's where the signals of status and need come in, the next crucial point. Those who have options convey this without saying a word. Their posture is relaxed, their gaze firm, their speech measured. Those who speak the language of necessity reveal their anxiety in every detail. They speak quickly, lean in too far, insist on being accepted. Machiavelli would say that politics guided by reality, not ideals, requires detecting these differences. Because those who need too much always surrender power. The end justifies the means here too. If the goal is to close a deal or maintain influence, one cannot appear desperate. Better to be feared than loved resonates when one understands that status comes from the perception of abundance, not from supplication. The appearance of virtue may be deceiving for a time, But sooner or later, scarcity shines through in the tone of voice, in the over-explanation, in the "I really need this." A simple example is job interviews. Two candidates may have the same background, but one approaches calmly with an upright posture saying, "I'm evaluating opportunities." The other speaks quickly, smiles nervously, and blurts out phrases like, "Please, I really need this opportunity." Loyal armies are won by those who exude confidence, not desperation. Virtue and fortune clearly apply. Virtue is the ability to control one's body language, to communicate abundance. Fortune is the right moment when this perception opens doors that, for the needy, would otherwise remain closed. The calculated use of force here is learning to pause, speak less, listen more. Constant adaptability is showing options even when reality is scarce, because those who appear to have alternatives control the game. A practical exercise. Next time you enter a negotiation, resist the urge to fill silences with justifications. Instead, pause, breathe, and let the other person feel the absence of your need. Avoiding being hated in this context means avoiding the role of the desperate beggar. A decision based on real human nature shows that those who demonstrate calm attract, those who demonstrate scarcity repel. This contrast creates a powerful lens for quickly perceiving the symbolic value of the people around you. Those who live in an attitude of abundance and those who lose themselves in the desire for approval. And precisely when this difference is understood, the next layer emerges. Who controls the scene? Who sets the pace? Who drives the agenda? Because status isn't just about options, it's also about who sets the rules of the game. Every conversation is an invisible struggle for territory. Whoever controls the frame decides what matters, what is ignored, and even the tone of the emotions allowed. Machiavelli knew that politics guided by reality, not ideals, begins precisely here, in the silent mastery of the stage. When someone imposes their agenda, others react rather than act. The end justifies the means, and in this realm, it doesn't matter if you're right, but whether you've managed to define the stakes. Better to be feared than loved is evident in this detail. Whoever dictates the framework doesn't need to shout or beg. They simply guide the flow. The appearance of virtue in this case can be a useful resource. Smiling, appearing calm, but behind the scenes, moving the pieces like a strategist who already knows where they want to go. Consider a classic example, a job interview. The insecure candidate answers everything asked, following the framework imposed by the recruiter. The prepared candidate, however, at some point changes the dynamic. Can I share an experience that connects with what you're looking for, and thus begins to guide the game? Loyal, self-made armies don't just follow leaders who have answers, but those who define the questions. Virtue and fortune work together here. Virtue is the ability to recognize when you're merely reacting. Fortune is the moment when the opening arises to shift control. The calculated use of force is to change the tone without confrontation, adjusting pace and focus to draw others into your territory. Constant adaptability means accepting the loss of small stakes to win the bigger game. A simple exercise. The next time someone imposes a topic, see if you can gently expand or redirect it. For example, if a colleague insists on discussing deadlines, you might say, "Sure, but before we talk about the deadline, can we align on the end goal?" Thus, shifting the frame from deadline to purpose. Decisions based on real human nature show that people follow those who set the terms, not those who chase them. Avoiding being hated here means not crushing the other with imposition, but guiding them naturally. The key is to realize that controlling the frame isn't about winning debates, but about creating the space where your narrative flourishes. And when control is challenged, that's where the next test arises. How someone reacts to a firm no when the frame doesn't bend to their will. Saying no is like shining a flashlight in the dark. It instantly reveals who's in front of you. Some accept the refusal calmly, adjust course and move on negotiating. Others explode, manipulate, or try to use blame as a bargaining chip. Machiavelli already knew that politics guided by reality, not ideals, requires testing one's reaction to frustration. The end justifies the means. Denying something small today can reveal how that person will handle a major obstacle tomorrow. Better to be feared than loved finds its most practical form here. Those who respect the no recognize limits. Those who don't demonstrate that they only accept relationships of convenience. The appearance of virtue may be disguising, but when faced with a clear limit, the veneer always cracks. Consider everyday life. A friend asks to borrow money, you politely decline and observe. If they understand and move on, there's maturity. If they react with drama, hostile silence, or emotional blackmail, there's a red flag. Loyal armies are only formed by people who know how to handle frustration without destroying bonds. Virtue and fortune come into play. Virtue is the ability to set clear boundaries without overly apologizing. Fortune is the moment when that no shows who is truly loyal and who was only there for the benefits. The calculated use of force is in standing your ground without giving in at the first sign of pressure. Constant adaptability means adjusting your denial, sometimes firm and direct, sometimes gentle, but always clear. A practical exercise. Start by saying small no's in simple situations, like declining invitations or proposals that don't make sense to you. Observe, who do you respect? Who do you try to circumvent? Who insists until they wear themselves out? Decisions based on real human nature show that no is a powerful filter for separating allies from opportunists. Avoiding being hated doesn't mean always being permissive, but learning to say no without over-excusing, a simple "I can't" is enough. Interestingly, it's in this space of frustration that another invisible but crucial aspect emerges: information management. Because those who don't know how to accept limits often try to compensate with excessive words, justifications, or conversely, with calculated silence. And that's exactly where the next key comes into play. How someone handles information is one of the biggest indicators of their position of power. Some people spill everything at once, eager to be accepted, confusing closeness with confession. This oversharing at its core is neediness in disguise. Strategic silence, however, is another story. Those who speak less, listen more, and choose the right moment to reveal, convey security. Machiavelli already taught that politics guided by reality, not ideals, is sustained by controlling what is said. The end justifies the means. Withholding information is not manipulation, it is intelligent self-protection. Better to be feared than loved resonates here. Those who speak little generate respect. Those who speak too much become easy prey. The appearance of virtue often manifests itself in smiles and friendliness, but it is in the way information is managed that true strength is measured. Practical example: in an interview, an insecure candidate talks more than they should, revealing irrelevant details about their personal life, trying to fill the silence with unnecessary stories. The candidate who masters the art of silence answers only what is necessary and from time to time asks a question that turns the tide. Loyal armies are formed not by those who talk too much, but by those who know what to say at the right moment. Virtue and fortune come into play. Virtue is the ability to filter information. Fortune is being faced with someone anxious who gives more than they should, revealing their weaknesses. The calculated use of force in this case is to speak little but with impact. Constant adaptability means alternating between silence and speech, never out of fear, but out of strategy. A simple exercise to apply. In your next conversation, resist the urge to fill every pause. Let the silence work in your favor. If the other person rushes to break the silence, you've already figured out who's more anxious and who's more in control. Decisions based on real human nature show that managing information is often more powerful than the information itself. Avoiding being hated in this context means maintaining an aura of mystery without becoming inaccessible. The balance lies in not exposing yourself too much, but also not appearing like a cold wall. And when this game is mastered, something deeper reveals itself. The body reveals what words hide. The look and body language begin to reveal who really matters in the scene. The body is a silent traitor. While the mouth speaks to one, the feet may point to another. This detail, which many overlook, is one of the keys to understanding who truly matters in a scene. Machiavelli reminded us that politics guided by reality, not ideals, requires this keen eye. Listening is not enough. One must see. The end justifies the means in this context because interpreting body language allows us to decipher intentions even before they are revealed. Better to be feared than loved takes on a new dimension here. Those who master body language don't need to ask, "What do you feel?" because they can already tell by the angle of the torso, the direction of the eyes, the way someone leans. The appearance of virtue may support fine words, but feet pointing toward the door betray a rush to leave. Imagine a dinner party. Everyone is laughing and chatting, but notice who someone is truly paying attention to. If the torso and feet are turned toward a specific person, that person holds the focus, even if others are speaking. Loyal, self-contained armies in the modern world are identified not only by flags, but by micro-gestures of bodily loyalty. Virtue and fortune are clear here. Virtue is training your eyes to perceive where the energy in the room is flowing. Fortune is being present when that detail reveals invisible alliances. The calculated use of force is adjusting your own body to communicate authority. Firm feet, open torso, directed gaze. Constant adaptability means knowing when to offer intense presence and when to step back to observe how others move. A simple exercise. At your next meeting, forget about words for a moment and just observe people's feet and torsos. Who is truly interested in you? Who has mentally distanced themselves? Who demonstrates loyalty? Who demonstrates avoidance? Decisions based on real human nature show that there's no point in saying, "I'm with you," if the body points away. Avoiding being hated here means aligning body and speech, demonstrating authenticity. But more than that, it's recognizing when others fail to maintain this congruence. And when you discover these signs, you also understand something even more valuable. What triggers make a person predictable, controllable, and moldable? The next step is to identify predictability indicators, the secret password that many miss without realizing it. Predictability is the loophole through which power leaks. Those who always act the same way when faced with certain stimuli sooner or later become puppets in the hands of those watching. Machiavelli understood this clearly. Politics guided by reality, not ideals, shows that predictable people are easy resources to manipulate. The end justifies the means, and in this game, noticing these patterns is more useful than believing in promises. Better to be feared than loved is directly connected. Those who are predictable are loved by manipulators, but never feared. The appearance of virtue doesn't last when the same triggers are used repeatedly to elicit the same reactions. Think of the colleague who always reacts angrily to criticism. Just poke at the wound, and they give in on a silver platter. Practical example. In a negotiation, if you notice that the other party always gives in when they feel they're going to lose something, you've already found their password. Loyal armies aren't built with predictability, but with strategically adaptability. Virtue and fortune reveal themselves once again. Virtue is the ability to perceive the other person's emotional buttons. Fortune is being in the right situation to push or avoid them when necessary. The calculated use of force means not overusing the trigger, but using it only when crucial. Constant adaptability also means not becoming predictable yourself, varying your responses, surprising, breaking patterns. Because being an easy-to-read stone means handing your freedom over to the first attentive observer. A powerful exercise. Think about which situations you always react the same way to. Someone praises you and you automatically compromise. Someone pressures you and you always back down. This mapping is golden because the enemy you know is no longer so dangerous. Decisions based on real human nature show that predictability, deep down, stems from the need to please or the inability to deal with frustration. Avoiding being hated isn't about always giving in, but learning to vary your responses so as not to be dominated. When you learn to recognize these triggers in others, you also realize who is capable of maintaining composure even at real cost. And this is where the game becomes more serious. What does a person do when there's real risk at stake? It's easy to appear upright when nothing is at stake. What's harder is to maintain your composure when the cost is real. That's when the veneer falls and authentic values emerge. Machiavelli knew that politics guided by reality, not ideals, is measured precisely in these moments, when someone must choose between losing a privilege or keeping their word. The end justifies the means because in these situations, it doesn't matter what was promised in times of plenty, but what is done in times of scarcity. Better to be feared than loved echoes as a warning. Those who fail to maintain their steadfastness under threat inspire no confidence, only pity. The appearance of virtue is useless in the face of real fire. Those who sell principles for convenience have already demonstrated their true loyalty, not to you, but to their own interests. Practical example. In a company, many employees claim to be committed, but as soon as a budget cut comes along, some rush to save their own position, even if it harms the entire team. Loyal armies only reveal themselves when the cost is apparent, and that's when you know who's truly on your side. Virtue and fortune clearly intersect here. Virtue is the courage to remain consistent even when it hurts. Fortune is the chance that puts everyone to the test in losing situations. The calculated use of force means observing these moments with a cool head, because decisions based on true human nature can only be made when the mask slips under pressure. Constant adaptability in this scenario means separating allies from opportunists before it's too late. A simple but revealing exercise. Remember the last time someone close to you had to choose between keeping their word or avoiding personal loss. What happened? This memory reveals more about that person's character than years of peaceful coexistence. Avoiding being hated doesn't mean ignoring these revelations, but accepting them as maps of who's who in your life. The curious thing is that by practicing this perspective, you realize that the entire journey, from baseline to reactions under real cost, is a refined art of human reading. Machiavelli would call this virtù, the ability to see beyond the surface and use the fortunes of events to strengthen your position. Because in the end, power lies not in what others say, but in what they reveal without realizing it when they think no one is looking. Have you noticed? You no longer look at a person the same way. Every gesture, every pause, every glance has become a key that reveals hidden intentions. And from today on, you hold in your hands the same weapon that kings, generals, and strategists used to never be surprised. But here's the question. Will you apply this knowledge, or will you let it grow rusty? Because knowing how to read the signs is pointless if you continue to allow others to control your situation, manipulate your boundaries, and use guilt as a chain. The power lies not in listening, but in observing, and you already know how to do that. So tell me, who in your life do you see differently after watching this video? Who turned out to be predictable, who only takes but never gives back? Write in the comments, because this is the time to expose the games that have always been playing out in front of you. And if this content has opened your eyes, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here every week, you'll learn more Machiavelli strategies applied to real life. The game of power doesn't forgive the naive, but it rewards those who decide to see.